This is TWiT.
So I thought I'd ask your comments on this editorial from Apple insider William Gallagher and Mike Worthley. Apple's management doesn't want NVIDIA support in Mac OS, and that's a bad sign for the Mac Pro. I didn't realize this, but Mojave doesn't allow NVIDIA GPUs. I guess I knew that. There's no drivers for it, but is it they actually don't allow it?
I don't think it's not that they don't. So my understanding as of a couple of years ago, and it might have changed, is that there was a couple things. One, there was an incident where Apple was using NVIDIA parts and they had a problem, and Apple felt like NVIDIA totally abandoned them on the issue, that it was an NVIDIA problem and they failed to support it, and they basically threw Apple under the bus for it. And that sort of thing makes Apple cranky, and Apple has big institutional memory. But also when they started to work on Metal, AMD was happy to give Apple complete access. You can write to the Metal, we'll get completely out of your way. If people want, they can use a card, but if not, you can just blast it. Like if you want to use OpenGL, that's fine. If you want to use this, that's fine. But if you want to go Metal, straight to the Metal, that's great. And NVIDIA's like, no, we're NVIDIA. You use CUDA and you like it. And Apple's like, but we want to use Metal. And now you have these two very successful, very proud companies who both want their way and have failed over the last 2 years to make an agreement that best suits both of their combined users.
So NVIDIA complained last October that they said Apple fully controls drivers for Mac OS. Unfortunately, NVIDIA currently cannot release a driver unless it's approved by Apple. There is no support for NVIDIA graphics cards in Mojave or later. So this hostility, whether it's going to limit you or not, does an eGPU still need to have a driver? I guess it does, doesn't it?
It does, and there are beta drivers that a lot of people have experimented with, and some have had quite a lot of success for, but they're not official drivers still, which is an annoying pain.
So, and actually, I kind of aim this at you, Alex, because I think you would like NVIDIA support.
Yeah. I mean, so NVIDIA handles, and I'm not going to get into too much of the detail, but it handles the graphics in a much different way than ATI, and so, or AMD, and so the way it chunks the data is much easier to manage in large. So ATI is definitely much more of a game-oriented, very small chunks process, and NVIDIA tends not to be that way, and it tends to be easier to deal with large data sets. And so NVIDIA is a better card, than the ATI ones. The problem is that NVIDIA wants to write as Renee said, NVIDIA wants to write their drivers, Apple wants to write the drivers, because the graphics system is so part of the actual OS that they don't want to give up control of that process, and it's for a lot of good reasons. And so both of them have good reasons for why they're trying to manage control of that. And the issue is that they're not going to, and they're at an impasse. I don't see how they get out of that impasse unless, Apple doesn't really need NVIDIA, and NVIDIA doesn't really need Apple. I think that's the bottom line.
It's a little frustrating, though, for those of us who want to use, for instance, this new RTX card from NVIDIA, which does real-time ray tracing, is using AI for interpolation, is really, they call it deep learning super sampling. So anti-aliasing is twice as fast, and it really looks amazing, right? So it's a little frustrating for people who want to do this, particularly since with an eGPU, there's no technical reason why you couldn't.
A Quake example?
Yeah, there's a Quake 2 update. It's the same Quake 2 engine.
There's a video on YouTube of someone playing Quake with ray tracing, and it was it's nifty.
This is Battlefield, but yeah, let me show you the Quake, because it's
the reality is that it is an edge case, though. From a day-to-day, what the average person's using for this, I think that
I can understand where Apple would say we're going to put Radeon chips in our computers. But why would they not allow me to use whatever I want in an eGPU?
Because they want to write the driver. Yeah. They want to write to the Metal, and they don't want.
It's part of a bigger battle.
Yeah, it's a much bigger thing, and they're not gonna give in to it, because they don't really have the game space on desktops anyway. So it doesn't mean anything to them.
Here's a Quake 2 with ray tracing. What's funny is you're using the same engine.
They're upset.
It's the same game, and you could see, in fact, how crappy the textures are. But when you get to lighting, it's like, whoa, what's going on here?
You blow stuff up. It's
we got to get somebody to blow something up here. So that's
it's bad for the pros who want CUDA cores.
That's really the issue. That's why I ask Alex, because see, there you go. See with the explosion, you don't. Gamers are one thing. No gamer's going to buy a Mac if you're really a serious gamer anyway.
And no pros are going to, no heavy duty graphics pros are going to buy a Mac either. So
that's frustrating, though. I mean, if you want to make a Mac Pro,
it'll take a long time for them to do that. I mean, the problem is that the Mac is so. I mean, the Pro. I mean, I have so for the heavy duty graphics stuff that I have PCs and
you're going to use Windows
Linux machines, and I've got big ones that cost. I mean, I have Linux machines.
Are there good Linux drivers for NVIDIA?
Oh yeah,
NVIDIA writes them.
Yeah. When I have Windows machines that cost $15,000. I mean, they have more than one, big GPUs and tons of RAM, and that was to build them from scratch. And so there's you have that heavy hard. I don't expect my Mac Pro to be able to do that. I don't expect the new Mac Pro to be able to do that. I don't, so I don't have that expectation that if I'm going to do heavy 3D graphics, that I'm going to expect my Mac to do that. And I don't think that. I just don't think it's a big enough market for Apple to really pay much attention to. I do expect it to be able to perform well when it comes to 4K or even 8K video, which Apple is spending a lot of time making sure that stuff is going to work into the future. And so I'm happy with that. When I want to do video editing, I'm not using a PC. I'm using my Mac to do that. But when I'm doing heavy duty 3D graphics,
you're never going to use a Mac.
It's a pipe dream.
Or gaming.
Yeah. It is kind of a sad reminder of kind of how topsy-turvy the Pro line has become, where I think that a consumer line should work from the top down, where it's always the company and the designer saying, we're going to define what this is for and how you use it. That's going to simplify the choices for the user. It's going to also increase the value for the user. When you have a Pro line, though, it really has to go from the bottom up, where it has to be the user is paramount. Whatever the user wants to do with this thing, that thing should be able to support that. If not because of features that are built in, at least because of roadblocks that we're not going to just sort of institutionally place in its way. So when you're starting to charge $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 for a desktop, I think the purchaser has the ability, has the power to say, hey, if I want to use an NVIDIA graphics card, and the only thing in your way is just giving NVIDIA a little bit of help and signing their driver, you're going to sign that goddamn driver. I'm sorry, you're going to sign that damn driver. It's at what point do you say that, hey, how much money do I have to give Apple before it will let me do something I want to do with a piece of hardware that I putatively own? So what does the word pro mean?
But I think you have to define I think exactly what you just said. You have to define what pro we're looking at, because I think that Apple has a strong base of video pros and not a strong base of 3D pros, and I don't think they're going to ever get those 3D pros back.
And but I don't care. Again, if I decide that the Mac is best for my workflow, I would understand if you're saying, if Apple was saying that we're not going to build a Mac with 17 PCI slots because that's just ridiculous for the things that we think that a Mac user wants to do. But when it comes to software, when it comes to all you got to do is support this company that wants to write a driver for this product that will just simply plug into existing point. I know it's not quite that simple, but this is not a startup company that's trying to find its third route of financing. This is Apple. They've got the resources to do that, and I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of pro users are walking away from the Mac, because the value proposition is just eroding year after year after year.
Well, I think that they walked away from the Mac because the trash can was a trash can, and it was good for about a month, and it's not upgradable. It's not, there's a lot of other things there. I think there's the number of pros in the video world is so much more than the number of pros in the 3D world. Apple could expand their market if they just took care of that market really well. I think that that high-end area is so tweaky. It is so hard to make everybody happy. I mean, I've worked in this. Yeah. I've been in this industry, that 3D industry for 30 years. And it is so tweaky. No matter what you do, someone's going to be upset that they can't put this little thing in and they can't do this thing, and they're going to be upset about it. And so it's going to be this, it is a whack-a-mole problem that you have to, the problem is every time you add a new thing that you support, you add a new liability and a new thing that is going to be more engineering time and so on and so forth. For Apple, it's a relatively small market. And I'm a hardcore Mac user. I mean, I use a Mac 90% of the time. When I do the hardcore video stuff that I need to do, or hardcore 3D stuff, then I switch over to Windows or Linux, and live streaming I do on Linux on Elementals. And so there's all these things that I just switch over, and I would love to have it done on a Mac. But I think the problem is that it's not just allowing NVIDIA to add a driver. It is forking the development on the Mac, and it means that there's new resources and there's new people that have to support that, and there's new things that are going to go wrong, and there's whole bunch of new levels of things that they have to manage in an area where they're probably not going to make those people happy anyway. That part of the world is so far away from Apple now that it would just be an incredible amount of work for a relatively small amount of revenue.